Why do we watch? Why did millions of people across the globe gather week after week to witness the betrayals, the bloodshed, and the heartbreak of Westeros? It wasn't just for the dragons or the epic battles. We were held captive by something far deeper, something that resonated in the oldest parts of our souls. We watched because, beneath the fantasy, Game of Thrones is a brutal, unflinching, and breathtakingly accurate story about us. It is a story about the human psyche, stripped bare. And to truly understand the power of this story, we must look at it through one of the most profound lenses available to us, the psychology of Jung. Because Westeros, from the frozen wastes of the north to the sun-scorched streets of King's Landing, is a world drowning in its own shadow. The Great War for the Iron Throne is a distraction. The real war, the one that defines every character and every tragic decision, is the war within. This is a Jungian analysis of Game of Thrones, an exploration of the shadows that haunt the Seven Kingdoms. At the heart of Jung's work is the concept of the shadow. The shadow is everything within us that we have repressed, rejected, and refused to acknowledge. It is not necessarily evil. It contains our darkest impulses. Yes, our rage, our greed, our lust, our cruelty. But it also holds our undeveloped potential, our hidden strengths, our raw, untamed creativity. It is the basement of our personality, the place where we throw everything we deem unacceptable to our conscious self, to our persona, the polite mask we wear for the world. The goal of a healthy life, according to Jung, is not to destroy the shadow. That is impossible. The goal is to integrate it. It is to go down into the basement, turn on the light, and make peace with what you find there, to acknowledge its existence, to understand its needs, and to harness its immense energy. When we fail to do this, when we pretend the basement doesn't exist, the things we have locked down there do not go away. They fester. They grow stronger in the dark. And eventually they will break down the door and burn the whole house down. Westeros is a world of burned down houses. It is a masterclass in the consequences of the unintegrated shadow. Look no further than Cersei Lannister. Cersei is a woman utterly consumed by her shadow. Her persona is the queen regal, poised, a mother devoted to her children. But beneath that thin, cracking veneer is a raging inferno of repressed ambition, paranoia, and a thirst for power, born from a lifetime of being dismissed as a woman in a patriarchal world. Her father, Tywin, saw her only as a political pawn, a womb for forging alliances. He praised Jaime for his martial skill but ignored Cersei's cunning political mind, a mind just as sharp and ruthless as his own. That rejected part of her, the would-be ruler, the true lioness, was cast into her shadow, and it is from this shadow that all of her actions spring. Her incestuous relationship with Jaime is a rebellion against the rules of a world that would deny her the right to choose. Her cruelty to her enemies is the rage of a person who has felt powerless for decades. When she blows up the great sept of Baelor, it is not just a political move. It is a literal eruption of her shadow self. She annihilates all her enemies in a blast of green, fiery rage, wiping out the structures of religion and politics that sought to control her. In that moment, the mask of the persona is incinerated, and only the Shadow Queen remains. Cersei's tragedy is that she never attempts to integrate this shadow, she simply allows it to devour her, and in the end it buries her in the rubble of her own ambition. Now consider a far more complex tragedy, Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys' entire journey is a battle with her archetypal shadow, the Targaryen legacy of fire and blood. For most of her arc, she tries to be a conscious ruler. Her persona is the breaker of chains, the Hysa, the benevolent mother who will use her power to create a just world. And for a time, she succeeds. She channels the fiery, destructive power of her dragons, the very symbol of her shadow, into a force for liberation. She is integrating her shadow in a productive way. She is using fire to burn away the chains of the old, corrupt world. But the shadow is always there, whispering. The Targaryen madness, the impulse to solve problems not with justice, but with annihilation. With every betrayal, every loss, every disappointment, that whisper gets louder. She loses her advisors, her friends, 2 of her dragons, her claim to the throne. Her persona, the benevolent queen, is battered and broken. The world has rejected her good self. In the end, faced with the surrender of King's Landing, she is left with only one tool, the one that has been waiting in the dark all along, fire and blood. The burning of King's Landing is the catastrophic failure of integration. It is the moment Daenerys gives up the struggle and allows the archetypal shadow of her lineage to consume her completely. She doesn't just defeat her enemies, she becomes the very thing she swore to destroy, a tyrant who burns innocent people in the streets. Her story is a devastating warning that even the noblest intentions can be consumed by a shadow that is not faced, understood, and consciously controlled. The journey of integration, what Jung called individuation, is the path to becoming a whole, authentic self. It is the hero's journey, and in Westeros, no one walks this path more clearly than Jon Snow. Jon's shadow is his identity as a bastard. It is the source of his shame, his feeling of being an outsider, a stain on the honor of the Stark name. He spends his early life defined by this lack. Catelyn Stark's coldness constantly reinforces it. So what does he do? He literally goes to the coldest, darkest, most rejected place in the world, the Wall. He joins the Night's Watch, a brotherhood of other rejected men, outcasts and criminals. In Jungian terms, this is a conscious descent into his own shadowlands. At the Wall and beyond, Jon is forced to confront everything the civilized world of Westeros has repressed. The wildness of the free folk, the ancient magic of the world, and the ultimate, existential threat of the White Walkers. He learns that the rigid rules of honor he was taught are insufficient. He must form alliances with his enemies. He must break his vows. He must kill, and he must die. His literal death and resurrection is the ultimate symbolic act of the hero's journey. He must let his old self, the boy who was ashamed of being a bastard, die completely, so that a new self, the integrated leader, can be born. He integrates his shadow, the part of him that is an outsider, and it becomes his greatest strength, allowing him to unite disparate peoples against a common enemy. But perhaps the most successful story of individuation in the entire saga is that of Sansa Stark. Sansa begins the story with the most superficial and carefully constructed persona imaginable. She is the little bird, the perfect southern lady obsessed with songs, knights, and lemon cakes. Her entire identity is a reflection of the fairy tale rules of the society she wants to join. And then, the world systematically, brutally shatters that persona. She is thrown into the lion's den of King's Landing, a world of pure shadow politics. She becomes a pawn, a victim, a plaything for monsters like Joffrey and Ramsay Bolton. She is forced to live in the darkest parts of the human experience. But unlike Cersei or Daenerys, Sansa does not let the darkness consume her. And unlike her younger self, she does not retreat into fantasy. She learns. She observes the masters of the shadow, Cersei, Littlefinger, Ramsay. She sees how they use fear, manipulation, and power. She doesn't become them. Instead, she integrates the lessons. She takes the hard, cruel wisdom of the shadow world and merges it with the stark honor and resilience that is her birthright. She develops a new, integrated persona, the Queen in the North. When she finally confronts Littlefinger, it is a masterful display of her journey. She uses his own methods, deception, political maneuvering, against him, but she does it in the service of justice and the protection of her family. She has been to the basement and has returned, not as a monster, but as a whole, wise and powerful woman who understands both the light and the dark. She is perhaps the only character who truly wins the game, not by sitting on the Iron Throne, but by becoming the fully realized master of her own kingdom and her own soul. And what of the world itself? What is the collective shadow of Westeros? It is the White Walkers. The entire Game of Thrones, the squabbling over power and succession between the great houses, is the drama of the conscious world, the ego. It is what they believe matters. But while they are playing this game, they are all willfully ignoring the true existential threat that is building in the north, beyond the Wall. The White Walkers are the perfect symbol of a collective shadow. They are the ancient trauma that has been forgotten and repressed by history. They are the cold, dead, unfeeling consequence of a past crime committed by the children of the forest. They are everything the living world of warmth, passion, and ambition wants to pretend doesn't exist. The Wall is the massive psychological barrier erected to keep this shadow at bay, to keep the unconscious from invading the conscious. And the central message of the latter part of the story is that this barrier will always fail. You cannot wall off your shadow forever. The Night King is the return of the repressed. The long night is the moment when the collective shadow breaks through and forces the world of the living to stop their petty ego games and confront the darkness they have ignored for 1,000 years. It forces them to integrate, to form alliances between enemies, to face the cold truth of their own mortality. Game of Thrones endures because it is a myth for our times. It shows us, in dramatic and terrifying fashion, the landscape of our own inner world. The Iron Throne, the ultimate prize, is a red herring. It is a symbol of the ego's desire for control, a desire that, as we see, ultimately leads to ruin and ash. The real throne, the real kingdom, is the self, and the only way to rule it is to have the courage to face the things you have locked in the basement. The journey of every character in Westeros is a question posed to us all. Will you be consumed by your shadow like Cersei? Will you be tragically overtaken by it like Daenerys? Or will you have the courage to descend into the darkness to confront what you find there, and to integrate it, emerging, like Jon and Sansa, as a more complete, more powerful, and more truly human version of yourself? The shadows of Westeros are our own, and the Great War is, and always has been, within.